Chapter 9 Cinderella. Long, long ago, there lived a little girl, Cinderella by name. When quite young, she lost her mother, whom she loved very dearly. Her father married a widow who had two daughters by her first husband. These two girls were older than Cinderella and were not half as good or beautiful. Soon Cinderella's troubles started. Her stepmother and stepsisters began to treat her most unkindly. Her sisters had all the good things in the world that girls of her age could wish for. Poor Cinderella, on the other hand, was made to do all the household chores like a maid. She had to wear only the cast off clothes of her sister and was never allowed to play, read, or write. She was forced to work from dawn to dusk every day, while all the time her stepsisters played, slept, and enjoyed themselves. Years rolled on, and little Cinderella grew up to be a beautiful lass of 17. At that time, the king of the country proclaimed that a dancing party would be given at the palace, to which all the young ladies of the kingdom were welcome. He had only one son, the crown prince, who was to succeed him as king. He wanted the prince to choose a bride for himself from among the ladies who gathered at the ball. Hence, all the young maidens of the country were invited. Cinderella's sisters were also among those who were invited. They dressed themselves finely for the occasion. Cinderella also wished to accompany them to the ball, but she was only made to wait on her sisters while dressing. When she expressed her desire and begged her sisters to give her a fine dress for the occasion, they only laughed at her desire to go to a party given by the prince of all the land. Leaving her to look after the house, they proudly stepped into their coach and were driven to the palace. Poor Cinderella was left at home to do the housework like a slave. She felt very sad and was in tears. She thought of her dead mother and wept. Just then someone in the room called, "Cinderella, Cinderella, Cinderella." Cinderella turned round and found her fairy godmother standing by with her magic wand in her right hand. The fairy kindly inquired of her what made her so sad. The girl told her tale of sorrow and begged her godmother to send her also to the ball. The fairy mother could not disappoint her. At once, with her magic wand, she turned the girl's rags into the finest dress in all the land. So glad and beautiful a dress was never seen or heard of. Cinderella had a diamond jewel on her head and a pair of shining glass slippers. In her new dress, she looked like a fairy princess. A gilded coach drawn by 6 pretty horses, along with 2 footmen and a driven, was now ready to take Cinderella to the prince's ball. Cinderella was now in all happiness and joy. She knelt in gratitude to her fairy godmother. The fairy, lifting her up, said, "My dear child, listen to me. The couch and horses, the dress and the jewels, the coachman and the footman are all the work of magic. With the last stroke of 12 tonight, they will disappear. Enjoy yourself well at the ball, but take care you come home before 12, for at the last stroke of 12, you will be again in rags, and your coach and horses, your coachman and your footman will all vanish. Remember this, my child, and all will be well." The first ball ended happily for both the prince and Cinderella. At the insistence of the prince, the king again proclaimed that there would be another ball to which all the young maids of the land were welcome. Accordingly, all the young ladies in the country set out for the dancing party. Cinderella's sister also went to the palace hall to attend the ball. In spite of Cinderella's request, they refused to take her. "What would be fine lady that danced with the prince say if she saw us with a dirty girl like you?" they said to her. Cinderella was left alone to do household work, but all her mind was on the ball that the prince was to give that night. So she thought of her fairy godmother. She appeared in an instant and helped to get her ready for the ball. With one wave of her magic wand, everything was ready once more for Cinderella to go out to the party. This time also the fairy godmother did not fail to warn Cinderella not to stay in the palace hall even a minute after midnight. The prince waited anxiously on the terrace of his palace, straining his ears and eyes to hear and see the gilded carriage. He rushed downstairs as Cinderella arrived, and taking her by the hand, he eagerly led her to the dancing ball. Not until the clock was heard striking 12 did she remember the fairy mother's words of warning. She would stay no longer to be seen in her rags. So gently pushing her way through the crowd, she dashed out of the hall. Just as she reached the stairs, the clock struck 12. On the stairs, one of her slippers slipped off her foot, but she did not stop to pick it up. She was anxious to reach her house before her sisters, so she ran home in her rags very fast. The prince was now in his wits' end. He could not understand the reason of the lady's sudden disappearance. He asked about her to everybody present in the hall. Suddenly, one of his trusted servants produced a glass slipper and told the prince that it had slipped off the lady's foot as she was hurrying down the stairs. The prince attended the ball no one, and it came to an abrupt close. With the glass slipper in hand, he retired to one of his rooms full of sorrow and wonder. The matter soon came to the king's knowledge. He hurried to the prince, who had locked himself in the room, and tried to comfort him as best as he could. The prince told his father that he had so completely lost his heart to the lady of the gilded coach, and he could no more live without her. One of the king's ministers whose advice he sought suggested that the king might cause the glass slipper to be sent round the kingdom to discover the lady whose foot it fitted. The king liked the idea, and accordingly he sent his men with the glass slipper. They went about with the glass slipper in hand and tried to each young lady in the land. At last they came to the house of Cinderella's sister. Each of them tried to put on the slipper, but in vain. Then the king's servant asked Cinderella to try it on. It fitted her foot so well that it was thought that the slipper had been made for her. The king's servant wondered if ever the prince would agree to marry a girl in rags. Just then a wonderful thing happened. Cinderella thought of her fairy mother. Soon the fairy appeared to her with her magic wand. At a single wave of the wand, the fine dress, the gilded coach, the driver, and the footmen were there. Cinderella once again appeared in her fine dress and began to get ready for the prince's ball. Her sisters fell on their knees and begged her pardon. They requested Cinderella to forgive them for the wrongs they had done to her. The gilded coach arrived in front of the king's palace. The prince, who had been anxiously waiting for it, rushed out to get Cinderella. He helped her out of the coach and took her in. He married her the very day. He said to her smilingly, "You will not run away again as you did the other day. You are now my wife and the future queen of the kingdom." To this, Cinderella's reply was but a smile, the sweetest that she ever smiled. The king, who had grown old and feeble, made his son the king of the country, and Cinderella became the